Well, I think they probably realize we've crossed paths before, dear. Why don't you take a few slow, steady breaths, try to relax, and imagine you're sitting in Llama's class for a moment. Some love stories don't end with a simple goodbye. They shift shape. They linger in the background and quietly influence everything that follows. For Don Johnson, one relationship has always stood apart from the rest. Not because it lasted forever, but because it didn't. Even after building a family, reshaping his life, and moving far beyond the old headlines, one connection from his past still carries undeniable weight. Those close to him say that bond never truly disappeared. And in a rare moment of honesty, Johnson admitted there is one woman he regrets losing. The truth behind that admission is far more complicated than anyone imagined. The story begins in Flat Creek, Missouri, where Johnson was born to a teenage mother and a father barely out of his teens himself. Looking back, he would describe his childhood as a contradiction. On the surface, it seemed interesting, even idyllic. But beneath that calm exterior was something darker. He has spoken openly about how emotional absence and instability left him with a deep sense of abandonment that followed him for years. His father struggled to make a living as a farmer in Missouri, and that failure eventually pushed the family to relocate to Wichita, Kansas. There, his father found steady work at Boeing and began climbing the ladder, while his mother supported the family as a beautician. Johnson later said whatever drive he possessed came directly from watching them work relentlessly despite limited options. They showed him how to push forward even when circumstances offered little reward. Still, that steady job did not translate into comfort. Johnson and his 3 younger siblings were packed into a tiny one-bedroom house in a housing project originally built for workers. By his own account, they were still very poor. But the heaviest burden of his upbringing wasn't financial. It was emotional. He later explained that the real struggle was psychological, something he didn't fully understand at the time. Years later, he would recognize that internal tension as the spark that fueled his creativity. Everything changed when he was 11 and his parents divorced. He initially stayed with his mother, but the situation spiraled quickly. Discipline became difficult. Johnson was already testing boundaries, acting out wherever he could. Before long, his behavior landed him in juvenile court. The judge decided he needed a change of environment and ordered him to live with his father. That move altered everything. Living with his dad introduced him to a different rhythm of life centered around hunting, fishing, and the outdoors. Years later, Johnson would describe that period as magical. For the first time, there was structure and connection. But there was also responsibility. As the oldest child, he felt pressure to help provide for the family, a burden heavy for someone still in his teens. By 16, the weight became overwhelming. He reached a breaking point and walked away from a home life that felt hopeless. He struck out on his own, carrying the belief that those harsh early years had shaped him into someone tougher. It was a good thing they had, because what lay ahead would demand every ounce of resilience he possessed. After graduating high school in 1967, Johnson set his sights on acting and enrolled in the theater program at the University of Kansas. It might sound like the beginning of a steady rise, but it wasn't. He dropped out after just 1 year. Still, leaving school didn't mean abandoning the dream. Instead, he headed west to San Francisco and enrolled at the American Conservatory Theater. Being closer to Los Angeles meant being closer to opportunity, and that decision paid off quickly. By 1970, Johnson landed his first film role in The Magic Garden of Stanley's Sweetheart. At the time, he felt proud and validated. The film was produced by Martin Pohl, an Academy Award nominee, and for a young actor trying to break through, that felt significant. For a brief moment, Johnson believed he had finally arrived. The difficult years seemed behind him, and the future appeared wide open. But that sense of triumph didn't last. As the early 1970s unfolded, Johnson worked steadily, appearing in films like Zachariah and The Harad Experiment. On paper, it looked like progress. In reality, none of those roles pushed him toward real stardom. The breakthrough he imagined simply wasn't happening. He was working, but he was stuck. It was a frustrating stretch defined by effort without lasting reward. The projects came and went, barely leaving a mark. During the filming of The Harad Experiment, Johnson met Melanie Griffith, the daughter of his co-star Tippi Hedren. The situation was complicated from the beginning. Johnson was 22. Griffith was just 14. Even in the anything-goes atmosphere of 1970s Hollywood, the age gap raised eyebrows. Still, the connection between them was immediate, and once it began, it moved quickly. Their early encounters felt cinematic. While the crew prepared scenes, they found themselves talking for hours. Griffith later recalled being completely captivated, describing Johnson as the most beautiful person she had ever seen. Hedren sensed something unusual unfolding. She described both her daughter and Johnson as wonderful people, but she could see Melanie behaving differently, more intensely than before. Emotions were clearly involved. Johnson later admitted he hesitated. He questioned whether pursuing the relationship was wise. That hesitation faded. Soon, he found himself picking up his girlfriend from high school, fully aware of how strange it looked. That phase was short-lived. Griffith was expelled from her Catholic school and moved into a Hollywood rental with him. From the outside, it appeared they were building a life together. Behind closed doors, the relationship was already volatile. They lived together for several years before separating in 1975. The split didn't last. About a year later, everything reignited dramatically. After an emotional late-night phone call, they impulsively flew to Las Vegas and married. The decision was rushed and fueled by emotion rather than stability. Griffith later admitted the marriage wasn't rooted in happiness but desperation. The renewed passion burned out quickly, and the union ended almost as fast as it began. Meanwhile, Johnson's career finally showed signs of life. In 1975, he starred in A Boy and His Dog, earning a Saturn Award for Best Actor. The role required him to act opposite a telepathic dog, demanding imagination and improvisation. Critics praised his performance, but the sudden attention unsettled him. He wasn't prepared for the pressure that followed. By the late 1970s, he was leaning heavily on alcohol and drugs. What began as partying became dependence, then addiction. Johnson later described that period as reckless and extreme, driven by a need to push limits once the cameras stopped rolling. Eventually, the lifestyle stopped feeling thrilling and started feeling suffocating. In 1984, everything changed when he landed the role of Sonny Crockett on Miami Vice. Ironically, he almost passed on the audition. When his agent urged him to fly to Los Angeles, he initially refused, preferring to stay sailing in Florida. After intense persuasion, he agreed. That choice saved his career. Once the show aired, Johnson didn't just become